Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So today we're looking at an amazing card which is being introduced to the gods. The Egyptian gods, you thought, okay, they're getting some decent support out here, you know, they're getting some ways of being tribute summoned easier, ways of actually destroying your opponent's spells and traps and getting rid of your opponent's monsters, and often in cases they're not able to respond to them. Well, it's just been taken another step, another level higher. Of course, you've got things like Mound of the Battle Creator, which already have this kind of protection to them for level 10 or higher monsters, but you don't have anything specific for the god cards themselves. Until now, Divine Evolution. It's a normal spell card. This card's activation and effect cannot be negated. 1. Choose one monster you control that hasn't already had the effect of Divine Evolution applied to it, whose original type is Divine Beast, or whose original name is the Wicked Avatar, the Wicked Dreadroot, or the Wicked Eraser, and if you do, it gains 1000 attack and defense. Also, its effects activations cannot be negated. Also, its activated effects cannot be negated. Also, it gains this effect. When it declares an attack, you can make your opponent send one monster they control to the graveyard. I can't tell you how amazing this card is enough. Okay, let's break down the effect. Firstly, it can only be monsters that are Divine Beast or the Wicked cards. Divine Beast, I think you've got the fusion of the Egyptian gods. I think that's a OCG exclusive card, and when it's summoned, you win the duel. That is why it's not been introduced in the TCG, nor will it ever be introduced officially into the TCG. They might introduce it as like a prize card, but it will never have use within the game. So the 3 divine cards, Winged Dragon of Ra, Slifer the Sky Dragon, and Obelisk the Tormentor. The other cards, the Wicked Avatar. The Wicked Avatar, I think, gains... It basically becomes the attack stat of your opponent's strongest monster, well, of the strongest monster on the field, plus 100 points, so it will always be stronger than one of your opponent's monsters. Wicked Dreadroot, 4000 attack, massively, massive monster. I think the same as the Wicked Eraser, it's got something like that. Now, actually, I checked the card now. Eraser's attack is based on the number of cards your opponent has on the field times 1000. So if they've got a few cards out there, then, it's multiples of 1000. But if you look at it from the Wicked Dreadroot, that becomes a 5000 attack monster. Obelisk becomes 5000 Slifer, depending on how many cards you have in your hand. Plus that 1000, these are not small stat lineups already. And then you've got to think, their effects cannot be shut down. Slifer is amazing for its effect. Now it's a massive threat. Traditionally, it's been a problem if people want to normal summon, and if their if their monsters have been under 2000 or less, they instantly get destroyed. Even if they have more than 2000, they lose those 2000 attack points, making them very weak and very susceptible to being OTK'd very easily. Obelisk, is just become a 5000 attack monster. Slife, with the Winged Dragon of Ra, you can get rid of most of your life points, trade in those to make it incredibly powerful, plus the 1000 is just amazing as an effect. Also, the ability to not shut down their effects is key to working with some of these cards. Slifer, if you shut down its effect, it has 0 attack. Same with the Wicked Dragon of Ra, same with basically the Wicked Avatar and the Wicked Eraser. The only ones who aren't affected by this effect negation to have, some stat lineup are Dreadroot and Obelisk. So those are the only 2 that kind of deviate from that, which is also very decent because it protects them. And that's ultimately what you want to do. Combine this with things like Mound of the Battle Creator and you're very good. And the cherry on top, when they declare an attack, you can make your opponent send one monster they control to the graveyard. Not destroy, send. The difference between destroying and sending are night and day. Destroying, if your opponent has a monster that happens to be protected from being destroyed, then that doesn't work. The other thing is there's lots of monsters that float, and the problem with those monsters are that you know, you can destroy them as many times as you want, but your opponent's still getting advantage from them by sending them. Traditionally, there aren't any effects that actually work. So I love how this card is. And actually, I'm going to just to see how good this card is, I'm actually going to briefly break down what these other cards do as their effects, just to give you that idea. Okay, so here we've got Slifer the Sky Dragon. I'm not going to go through the stat lineup. You know, it's question mark, attack and defense. It requires 3 tributes to normal summon, and it cannot be normal summoned or set. This card's normal summon cannot be negated. When normal summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated. And once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, you send it to the graveyard. It gains 1000 attack and defense for each card in your hand. And if a monster is normal or special summoned to your opponent's field in attack position, that monster loses 2000 attack. Then if its attack has been reduced to 0 as a result, destroy it. Potentially, if you've got certain cards in your hand, if you've got 6 cards, this becomes a 6000 attack monster. With the effect of the spell card, that becomes a 7000 attack monster. Nothing, no joke to face, especially since your opponent's monsters are constantly going to be losing 2000 attack. This all builds up to an OTK very quickly with this card. So with Obelisk the Tormentor, it's one of those that isn't really affected by the effect negation. It's 4000 attack and 4000 defense. Again, it requires 3 tributes to normal summon, and it cannot be normal set. This card's normal summon cannot be negated. When normal summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated, cannot be targeted by spells, traps, or card effects. And once per turn during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, send it to the graveyard. You contribute 2 monsters to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. This card cannot declare an attack the turn this effect is activated. Again, the effect isn't really what we're here for. It being 4000 attack and defense means it becomes instantly a 5000 attack and defense monster. Very decent and very powerful. Potentially stronger than Slifer, as that's too dependent on the cards you have in your hand. The Winged Dragon of Ra has question mark, attack and defense. It cannot be special summoned and requires 3 tributes to normal summon. It cannot be normal set. This card's normal summon cannot be negated. When normal summoned, other cards and effects cannot be activated. When this card is normal summoned, you can pay life points so that you only have 100 left. This card gains attack and defense equal to the amount of life points paid. And you can pay 1000 life points, then target 1 monster on the field and destroy that target. For a couple of reasons that evolution card is so good for this. First, the massive weakness of Ra is, okay, you can pay it your life points so you only have 100 left. If your opponent shuts down the effect, normally this means it has 0 attack points. So you've spent all those life points, you put yourself in a bad position, and your opponent can just one-shot you the next turn. The other thing is, you know, you don't have the life points to use the secondary effect, even if you wanted to, unless you're able to recover your life points. Whereas with that evolution spell card, you've got the ability to just send a monster, which is so much better than destroying. So even from that effect, looking at it, you can do so much with that card. To help with Winged Dragon of Ra. Okay, so the Wicked Eraser is question mark, attack and defense. This card cannot be special summoned. This card cannot be normal summoned or set, except by attributing 3 monsters. The attack and defense of this card are each equal to the number of cards your opponent controls, times 1000. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, destroy all cards on the field. During your main phase, you can destroy this card. This is dependent on what your opponent has, so that even if they have only like 1 or 2 cards, it's still a 1000 or 2000 attack monster. With the Divine Evolution card, that boosts it by another 1000, so you're not too dependent on what your opponent has. At least it will have a stat line up to it. That's a big flaw to it, and also the fact that, you know, your opponent would normally try and shut down this effect. It makes it so much more worthwhile to run this card. The Wicked Dreadroot is a dark attribute, fiend type level 10. It's got 4000 attack and defense, and its effect is this card cannot be special summoned. This card cannot be normal summoned or set, except by attributing 3 monsters, and you halve the attack and defense of all monsters on the field except this card. It basically doesn't want anyone else on the field. Get off my field. It's very powerful. Instantly shutting down your opponent's attack is a massive ability in itself. It will also come at a 5,000 attack and defense monster, and also it's able to send a monster using Divine Evolution once per turn. That is just unbelievable how strong that is. And again, like Obelisk, it's not susceptible to, you know, okay, we negate your effects, but we're still having to deal with a 4,000 body on board, which makes it devastating. And of course, we need to look at the final card, which is the Wicked Avatar. Again, this has question mark attack and defense. This card cannot be special summoned. This card cannot be normal summoned or set, except by attributing 3 monsters. Your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards until the end of their second turn after this card is normal summoned. The attack and defense of this card are each 100 points higher than the highest face-up monster's attack on the field, except the Wicked Avatar. This card is also really good for what it does. Firstly, it shuts your opponent down from using any spell or trap cards for 2 turns. You know, that can be enough to just stop your opponent in their tracks if they can't activate things. Think of it as like a massive, like a double version of Cold Wave. People still love that card, and that was banned for a while. The other thing is, yes, it is dependent on, you know, being 100 points higher than the highest face-up monster. I'm a little bit confused about how this is going to work in with Divine Evolution, because surely doesn't it always have to be 100 attack points more than that monster? If it is, then that's probably the only downside I can see to Divine Evolution. Otherwise, if it's just flat another 1,000 points on top regardless, that's always a good idea. Especially if you can put that other monster on board, and this, so you have a little bit more control of the game. Otherwise, essentially this card has no attack points until something is face up, so you always want to have that level of control. I do question one thing I would say is it is limited to the Egyptian gods and the Wicked cards. I would have loved to have seen it introduced to maybe the Sacred Beasts, but I can understand they've just had a structure deck. They've had quite a lot of support, and that support has been very decent for them. Not as massive as I would say for the Egyptian gods, as I can see now. So that's probably the justification of kind of separating all the different god archetypes. I mean, you've also got, by that standard, you'd be looking at things like, you know, the Norse gods as well as another reason why should this card impact on those. I would love to see in the future maybe something similar to this help those cards, because they're still incredibly weak. I know they got like a Link monster and they've got a little bit more support, but none of those are to the point where this card is, or any of the recent support for the Egyptian gods. I'm so excited about these cards. I think you might actually start seeing people running them now. And actually the Egyptian gods might be a threat. Whatever you think about it, leave those comments down below. I'd love to hear, and don't forget to subscribe. Let me know what you think.